Do you have a child who lies to you on a regular basis? Or do you find it difficult to be honest with people in your family? I've been thinking a lot about this kind of dynamic that is set up in some relationships where it becomes very easy to lie and very difficult to tell the truth. And my first thought when I hear, oh, my child is lying all the time, is what could you do to help them tell the truth? And thinking about the fact that we are all brought up in a neurotypical world at the moment, we all have been, or pretty much all of us. There may be the odd family that's been brought up in a neurodivergent environment that's very supportive, but for the majority, we're brought up in a neurotypical world with the rules of reward and punishment. And I've spoken about this in other videos, but reward and punishment often does not work at all for many, many neurodivergent brains. And it's this idea of what are you trying to achieve with this? And this is very difficult when we've been brought up in neurotypical households, especially with the old school style of parenting, because we often have this reaction of, well, I'm the parent, you should do what I say. You should follow the rules, you should obey me. And my question to you is, what do you want as the outcome? Because if what you're seeking is obedience from your child, if you're lucky, the punishments and rewards will make your child obedient. However, if you have a child who has PDA, if you haven't heard of this before, it's pathological demand avoidance, a terrible name. But I'll give you an example. So, for example, you might, as a person with PDA, you might really be looking forward to having a shower. Suddenly someone comes along, a parent, and says, oh, you have to have your shower now. You haven't done it yet. You've got to do it now. Something triggers in your brain and you literally cannot bring yourself to step foot in that bathroom because someone has now told you to do it. It becomes impossible to do it. And for people who don't have PDA or don't have an experience of PDA, this is really difficult to comprehend. I have some traits of it. I don't have it quite as bad as some members of my family, although I'm not sure my parents would have agreed when I was growing up. I was described as willful. So if you were ever described as willful, you may have PDA traits too. And I don't know what the psychological or physiological processes are behind this. I just know that it's real and it is diagnosed in some countries as a label in its own right. Here in Sweden, it's more commonly seen as part of an autistic profile. But it can be present with people with ADHD as well. And if you do have a PDA child, telling them what to do is going to result in the absolute opposite of what you want. And punishing them or even rewarding them is also going to result in the opposite of what you want. So some neurodivergent people experience rewards as pressure. It's as bad as punishment. There's this huge pressure to succeed, otherwise you won't get the reward, and it's really difficult. So, for example, with an ADHD brain, people think, oh yeah, the reward will give you dopamine, but it doesn't because you're not there yet. And often, for example, if I'm trying to get my kids to do stuff, they'll get the reward first because then they get the and it might sound really counterintuitive, but then they get the dopamine boost in order to be able to carry out the activities I'm wanting them to do after that. So if they're being very demand avoidant, I might say, okay, let's have half an hour of playing together. And whilst we're playing together, we'll try and get some of these jobs done. So it might be teeth brushing, it might be getting dressed. And if we come back to this idea of lying, if your child lies to you, what are you doing to facilitate that? Or what are you doing to co-create that? Because if we think of all relationships as flowing two-way, even with a parent-child, like the old school way of looking is the parent tells the child to do stuff and the child is just this mouldable creature at the bottom. That's not how it happens. They have their own character and they have their own personality. And if they have PDA, they've got quite a strong character and quite a strong personality, quite a strong sense of knowing what they do and don't want to do in any given moment. So if you want your child to be truthful, you have to create conditions where they can be truthful. And most of the arguments I hear happening are generally around older kids and teenagers, but can happen with younger kids. And it's things like, don't want to wash, don't want to brush my hair, don't want to brush my teeth, don't want to get dressed, don't want to do anything you've asked me to do. And if we think as adults that we often go through mini periods of burnout, so we might have every week, at the end of each week, we might just be able to function by crawling under the duvet for an hour before we can get up and do the rest of the evening. Some adults I know do this every day because the day is so exhausting that they can't then function in the evening without having an extended, complete sensory break. It may happen monthly for women who have their menstrual cycle. They may have periods of burnout regularly that are linked with the menstrual cycle when the estrogen levels make things trickier for them. So if we think that there are periods of mini burnout, what do we do when we're experiencing burnout? We reduce all demands. And I know for myself that on the days where I am feeling more exhausted, I can't face the idea of a hair wash. And if someone came up and said, you have to wash your hair, that would likely trigger either a reaction of absolutely not, or I would just lie and say, I've done it. And I remember doing things like this when I was a kid. If something just felt too difficult and I didn't have the space to say, can't handle that today, can we just leave it? Then I would end up lying about it. And I often say to parents too that teenagers lying is really, really normal. So setting aside all of these extra reactions in terms of the PDA profile or struggling with extra demands being placed upon them, teenagers' behaviour is often this experimentation of my needs versus your needs as the parent. So what actually matters to me? What do I consider to be a good use of my energy and my time? And as adults, we have so much more freedom than our children do. So we have the freedom of what we're eating every night. No one ever says to us, you have to eat this. We choose what we want to eat and we cook it. No one says if you choose to be a person that doesn't like making their bed because what's the point? You're only going to get back in it, which I've heard from a lot of adults. No one's going to make you make your bed in your own home when you have your own house. And, I can hear a reaction that comes from many parents. Well, it's not their house. I'm paying for it. It's my money. They're living under my roof. And that is true. But my question to you is, do you want harmony or do you want conflict? Because if you want harmony, it'll be down on you as a parent to figure out how to create that harmony. And generally, it might not involve setting all the rules yourself. And I'm not saying that there shouldn't be boundaries. Of course there should be boundaries. And of course there should be certain tasks that we have to do every day. But if your child is really, really struggling and can't get out of bed, the shower's not going to happen. So it's just to have a little think about how we co-create these dynamics in our relationships. And it's not just parent and child. It could be partners, it could be friends. But if lying is an issue for you in any of your relationships, whether you're being lied to or you are doing the lying, it might really be worth thinking about what's triggering this lying. How does it benefit you? Or how does it benefit them? And thinking about ways to maybe do things a little bit differently. Please do drop me a line if you want to talk about this or work through this in more detail. And if this video is helpful to you and you want to know more about this, just let me know. And please do hit subscribe. I'm always very grateful for more followers. Take care, everyone.